Hey, I'm Charbel. I'm a little bit nervous, just about that much right now. So thanks for coming tonight. This is great to see so many people interested in UX. And if you can't hear me, I'll talk up a little bit. So as Vince said, we're going to be talking about the past, present, future of UX. And for me, I'm also talking about learning UX and the importance of mentorship as professionals. So let's get started. It's about half an hour. There'll be me talking and then Q&A and whatever happens afterwards. So, hi, I just said that bit. We're going to talk about user experience design, what it does, who does it, how do you do it, and where it's heading. And then we'll talk a little bit about morphing into a UXer, and I'll try and stop saying as much as I can. Alrighty, so as Vince said, I'm the founder of Velvet Onion and Velvet Onion Academy. Don't laugh. Velvet Onion is a digital design agency with a pure UX focus. We do the full service of design, digital, and attached to it is a school, so Velvet Onion Academy. And our first range of courses have been all about UX, and we're starting to grow it into other disciplines in the next couple of months, starting with research. And so Vince told you what I've done, worked with a hell of a lot of clients. We're working with quite a number of clients and startups at the moment, corporates and startups at the moment. So what is UX? You guys all familiar with UX? Who's not? Okay. So what it isn't is user interface. That's the thing that a lot of people confuse UX with being, is a deliverable being what it's going to look like. So what it is, it's all about how it works, how something works, whether it's a computer, a desktop application or an app, how it feels to the person, who's using it, how they use it, what they're doing, and what we want them to do. Can you see? So, cool. And so where did it come from? So the thing with UX is it has been around, well, experience design has been around for a long time, and it's always based on what we have available to us. And the same with every sort of design discipline, whether it's product design or, in our case, it's experience design. So the beginning of persuasive design was Adam and Eve. Yeah, a little bit of temptation, which is what we kind of do these days. Then fire. You know, what could we do back then? We learned with a little bit of flint, we could start fire and have a barbecue. You know, the first street artists, storytellers. You know, so you see from the beginning, it's all about the communications and some of the basic tools. Hippocrates, he was the first service designer. And have you guys heard about service design? Which is the next sort of phase of service design. So he designed the ideal surgery. He understood that bacteria and cleanliness, and the absence of cleanliness was what caused disease. So he designed the first surgery to be clean and operable in there. Renaissance inventors, you know, the flying machine, that was da VINCI. There, movable type, that brought type and print and reading to the masses. The telegraphic inventors, you know, Hughes and Bell, legendary. Then this little device, which started changing everything. First computer, you know, you start to see the history of it, the remote control. This thing, I love this. Nothing between you but space. That's kind of us now. See, look. And libraries is where information architecture started. So are you guys familiar with information architecture? It's kind of where we started in digital, being user experience designers, and I've been doing this since before the turn of the century. So that's quite a while now. So 1998 was my first job as an information architect. And then imaging. So as you can see, like things are progressing and progressing more and more. So the first bit of interactive TV was the kids playing with the TV program. So they had books, and the TV would talk to the books and get them playing. Fashion, simplicity. You know, Coco Chanel said it before. It's the keynote of all true elegance, and this is what we try and do with digital design and interface design, is get it down to the simple core components and the things that we want people to do and what they want to do. The explosion of culture, you know, game shows. Then we start getting to the emotional exploration, things that delve into our darkest fears. Do you guys remember this movie? Poltergeist, you're all too young. The word processor. So we were able to start creating personal content quickly and without liquid paper and tape and throwing bits of paper around. We could edit, copy, paste, do all that sort of stuff. Then we started interacting with content. You know, this is when we could plug a modem into a computer and start seeing this thing called the internet. And now we've moved to the personal device where we are at one with content. You know, and everyone familiar with that? Yeah, good. All right, so what does UX do? So what we have to do is make things useful, usable, desirable. And we start with understanding people in the business, like what is it that we're trying to do in business? Because I believe that there's a whole thing about user experience design and user-centered design, which is absolutely vital. Without the business, though, there is no user experience. So it starts with business experience. And we're reading more and more about this these days. Service design is all about the business first, and then the customer. Looking at our vision, why are we in business? Brings our customers to the core of the design process. And we make the complex easy, ideally. And the thing is that we do improve people's lives, like it or not. Whatever we do with good design makes things better. And so we're improving people's designs, whether it's a banking app, and we just make transactions seamless and easy to do. The smallest things makes people's lives better. You guys familiar with Jason Silver? He's full on. But he's right. I mean, he talks about empathy, and this is the core of what we do, is empathy, which is truly understanding and getting into people's shoes as the basis of design. So user experience design would be great if we could call it people experience design, but it doesn't flow as well. So it is user experience design. And so it's all about understanding and empathy before we start designing. And how do we do that? Oh, must talk about this. So Assumption is a really, really good tool that we dispense with really, really quickly. So this is a story about a UK research firm who was going into Africa to make people's lives better. What they witnessed in this particular village in Kenya were every morning these women were carrying these things on their head and walking 2 kilometres to go get water and 2 kilometres to bring it back to the village. So they thought, what a great idea, why don't we build a well in the centre of the village to help them? And so they did. And overnight, when they finished the well and they taught them how to use it and get the water out from the earth, it was destroyed. And so what they found out when they asked the people was that, when they started asking the women, is that they destroyed it because they used that time to walk and bitch about their husbands every morning. So, and that's the importance of research. So this is where we start. And it's true, I didn't make that up, that's a true story. And so what do? We make things tangible, and it's a really low-cost way of trialling new things before we move into design, before we move into build. So we do a whole lot of testing, sketching, prototyping to get to an idea really quickly, and we involve people in the process. So it's not an isolated process. So it's quick and it's cheap. And we involve everybody in the whole process. Lots of things that make a UX designer. My favourites are introvert and extrovert, because you've got to be a little bit reflective and you have to have a lot of interests and experiences with different things in there. So who does UX? So we start with research. So that's a field unto itself these days, UX researcher. And this starts from basic surveys right through to deep anthropological type studies. So that's all about context. Information architect is all about structure. Interaction designer is about the movement. Visual designer is about feeling. And the tester is all about feedback. So these are really important parts of the UX discipline, so to speak, because it's a collection of a lot of disciplines. And early UXers tend to do a lot of these things. These days, in the bigger corporations, these are roles that are split out, But it's all about experience design. So why do we do UX? So we can understand what we're doing, why we're doing it in the beginning. And we look for the real problems. It's not just based on assumption or, well, what a great idea, why don't we do this? We identify needs and design to them. And we create stuff that's relevant to the business, relevant to the person that we're designing for. And most importantly, everyone thinks that they are their own customer. Fail. I did a project for a bank once, and I can't talk about which. I should have just said it, didn't I? Anyhow, the guy who was in charge of the project, he was in charge of the online banking, called us in and absolutely dismissed the redesign because it didn't fit on his computer. And we went to his office. He had one of those Asus computers that had a screen that big. And we almost lost the project because of that. And so the process, so we cover a hell of a lot of things that we do in order to get to a good design. So this is a sort of general UX process. I'm sorry from here. So we start with stalking. So research from observing people, online surveys, they're the basic things where we can get a general picture. But the deep research is when we're interviewing people, when we're watching them in their contexts and getting deeper, true insights out of that. Why do we research? Like the African story there. Supposing is good, finding out is better. And then personas, Frankenstein. So distilling all the research and all the people that we've met into archetypes and the sort of people that we design for. So that they guide our design process. Journeys, so what are the paths to get people to an action point that we want them to do? What are the principles? So it's got to be useful. Does it solve a problem? Usable. Can somebody actually use it? That's learnable. When they come back the second time, do they know what they have to do? Aesthetic, it's got to look good. And emotional, we've got to invoke some sort of an emotional response, whether they don't think about it ever again, perform a transaction online, log out, and it's done. That's quite a good response to get from people. And then we start looking at design thinking, which is coming up with an idea and using really, really focused, short, sharp techniques to get people into their creativity, coming up with ideas that get better and better and better in a very short space of time. The vision setting, why? Like, why are we in business in the first place? Or what is it that we're trying to do and why are we trying to do it? Persuasive design, this is what do we want people to do? So there's this thing called the FOG behaviour model, which looks at motivation, ability, and the sorts of triggers, and we start designing around that. Quite useful techniques. Visual design, this is where we bring the brand to life. This is like that. Accessibility, like looking at people of all levels of ability. If anybody ever says disabled person in front of me, don't. Just don't. And information architecture is how we structure content to make it findable. Then we go into the detailed design. So this is just a quick overview of the sort of process that we follow for UX. And then we test on those humans to make sure that it works. And so the toolkit, research, spoke about that before. So this is where we make things useful, right? Information architecture is making things findable. Interaction design is making it usable. Experience design is all about the seamless experience there. And then we look at persuasive design, where we make things happen. So these are the things that we do as UXers. So where's it heading? So currently we're playing in the space of user experience design, and more we're moving into service design. So user experience design is all about a discrete interface, whether it's a mobile app or a desktop application. Service design is the entire ecosystem that fits where the product fits into. So we look at the business, the processes there, the back of house, the staff, the back of house systems, everything, really. Looking at spatial design, how people move and use spaces. And now we look into product design. And the beauty about product, like what's happening now, is that we're able to go from an idea to prototype to get funding to market so quickly. And then intelligence design, artificial intelligence. Who's worried about that? So we look at whole body interactions. Right now we design for micro interactions, which is mouse click, swipe with thumb, finger, sort of gestures. Soon enough we're going to be designing entire body experiences. Samsung released a smart TV about 3 years ago, which was really stupid. It didn't work. But it's the beginning. It's the beginning of using our entire body to start gesturing. We look at wearables, where people are doing all this sort of stuff, and things change when we move our gestures. Printing reality, 3D printers. So I asked a question last week to somebody, can a 3D printer print itself? And apparently it can. A 3D printer can print all of its own parts. And then I asked, okay, what happens if it can assemble itself? And that's where it starts to get scary. So, and then it's like, oh, maybe I should make something even better. Then touchless interfaces, Google's now trialling this thing where just movements of hands, like slight movements can change things around you. So, the physical gaming environments. Who's designing this stuff? It's not just programmers who are designing this stuff. There's people who actually think about how things move, and that's user experience designers. Thought-activated technology. Now, Boston University, about 15 years ago, they trialled the first level of thought-activated technology where they were able to get a person with the things on their head to create and delete a folder on the desktop. And now, what we're doing is able to awaken a sleeping animal from a thought. Kind of freaky, right? Yeah. And we have to design those experiences. Not far off, implantable technology. There's RFID chips already. They can track us if we have to. Creepy. It's getting creepier and creepier, but it's also broadening what we can do as designers. So, any more on that? No, so how do you become a UX designer? So you start with playing. I mean, you really have to play with things and understand how things work. And it's not just digital devices, it's how everything works, how everything moves. Play, practice, it's key for any sort of discipline, really. Copy. Look at what's been done and copy. You know, this is where you all start from. You know, musicians, when people learn to play music, they copy. They don't come up with a symphony to start with. They copy it first and then become good. You read lots. You know, there's heaps of online courses. There's a lot of physical courses. Small plug for Velvet Onion Academy. And you know, the whole thing about modular learning is that we all have something that we start with, and in the way that learning is happening these days is that we start bolting on things that we're interested in and things that we're good at. So designers are moving into UX design. Programmers are moving into UX design. Product managers, you know, it's moving that way. So, you know, use what you have and build from there. And that's always a good starting point to get into this sort of field. Backgrounds from the people. I mean, I met an industrial designer last week who was an incredible UX designer. And as industrial designers, they have to use similar sort of processes for product design that we use for digital design. And, you know, right now, the thing is with this sort of modular learning is that we're all short of time, and the industry is really short of skills. Apparently there's, what was the stat? There's 24,000 design jobs. How many? 3,000? And only 3,000 people available to fill them. It's kind of a buyer's market, or like an employee's market right now. There's such a shortage. And even Atlassian is going abroad now to get people. You know, that's how much of a shortage there is. And then it comes down to the responsibility of teaching and learning. So the experts have to teach. Like, you know, I don't care what people will say. You can't just focus on what you're doing. You've got to focus on who's coming up to replace you as well. Yeah. There's a lot of people. Yeah. Yeah, so there was some work done recently with Guzman y Gomez. A friend of mine designed their kitchen in the MLC Centre, where not just their kitchen, their entire kitchen and the staff working space for workflow and the whole service procedure to make sure that the entire thing flowed so smoothly that there was never any sort of hiccups. So it was all about maximising the time and the movement through the space. And that happens in restaurant designs. You get specialised restaurant consultants who design kitchens, just pure kitchens, just to ensure that from entree right through to dessert, the entire thing is served seamlessly. And that's what we're starting to move into these sort of spaces, experience design. It's not just experience about digital. Yeah, well, that's where service design kicks in now, because service design looks at the entire process. It's not just the customer journey from what is it that we're delivering. Like, you know, is it an app? Is it a desktop application or whatever? It's looking at the business itself, like the stakeholders, who they're responsible, where the silos are, and what a single sort of the link between all of their processes. And what service design starts to do is say, okay, there's a problem with the system here or an internal process, which often maps to a customer problem as well. So the idea with the business design is fixing the internal problems, so that also fixes the customer problem. And that's where it's moving more and more. I mean, there's a few very specialised service design agencies in Sydney now, and it's a field that's growing. Like it's crazy growth. It's not little bits of growth. Yeah. So and that's business design, service design. So it's, you know, what is the service that we're delivering from the biz? How do you get into it? You pay a lot of money to people. It's part of it is user experience people are moving into it. It's a natural sort of thing. Researchers, it's how to get into it. It's practice and experience. Like, it takes a little bit of time and getting with the right sort of agencies as well. So in Sydney, Fjord is probably about the best known service design agency, and they're brilliant. They're really good at what they do, and they do massively complicated pieces where it takes 6 months to map a service, or a business part of. Yeah. So how you get into it? It's What may I ask? What you do? UX. You're a UXer. There you go. So it's a natural progression from user experience design into, because you use a lot of the techniques that you would use on a customer, and you apply it back to the business. So with ethnographic research, ethnography has always been about the study of cultures, and more it's starting to become the study of corporations or corporate culture. So I haven't done any ethno research at all, but there's a a friend in the States who's coming back to be taking up ethnographic research very, very soon. So it's a field that's growing at a big level. It's not something that I would apply, and I'm not directly answering your question, I know that. So for ethnography it fits within a service design type thing where you've got to understand what's happening in the culture from a cultural point of view. Service design is more about what's happening from a functional point of view and a task and a utility point of view. And ethnography looks at it's a cultural probe, effectively, whether it's a corporate cultural probe or a community sort of cultural probe. I haven't seen a lot of it happening in Australia yet, not yet, but there are quite a few there. We had a girl sitting in one of the classes last week. Was it last week or week before? She's an ethnographic researcher doing stuff for a marketing company, right now. So marketing companies are employing different levels of research now. It's less about focus groups and more about understanding people. So, which I'm loving because I'm not a fan of focus groups. I was going to say I hate them, but that would be harsh. But yeah, because with research, asking somebody a question doesn't always give you a true answer because sometimes people want to please or get the right answer. And you've probably seen that before in your work. But when you're observing somebody, it's more difficult for them to lie about what they're doing than what they're saying, what they're doing is often can be a different thing. Any research is good. It's better than no research. It is, that's the reality. I mean, if it was limited time and budget, it's the things like surveys or guerrilla interviewing where you just stop people to ask them a few questions. You can get that done fairly quickly and you can get some insights, but you don't get a lot. And research takes time. It's when people say, well, I don't have time or budget, it's like, well, you're not going to get the insights. It is that simple. Like time and small budget, small amount of time does not map to extensive insights. And it's that sort of thing. But any research is good, any research, as long as as you're not asking your teammate, who's working on the project, because that's not the right sort of research. Yeah, it's skewed. Banks seem to have all the money at the moment. And insurance companies. We're doing a lot of work with insurance right now. The boys are still doing projects with a bank. Okay. Well, it's actually looking at the internal processes. Can I say? CBA. So looking at the internal systems at CBA. So that's something that's never been touched. People for the last 10 years we've been looking at customer-facing systems, and what they're realising now is that if they can start fixing the internal systems. There's a lot of gains from making things efficient from the inside. So a lot of the corporates, so the banks and the insurance companies and also traditional advertising agencies are the ones who've recognised that they've got to get smarter with this sort of approach in terms of understanding what they're doing and why they're doing it. So the growth is not just CBA. I mean, you look at every other bank, they're desperately trying to hire. I know that just from some of the conversations I've had with people in those areas, insurance companies. I got a call from the woman who's head of digital at TAL the other day saying, do you know an experienced director? It's like, good luck with that. And traditional advertising agencies are making the shift now. And they have to, they just absolutely have to, because the old school advertising is not working anymore, and it's not where the demand is. From a client point of view, they're looking at where they're going to grow, and it's digital where the growth is. So nobody reads billboards, nobody reads newspapers. Well, they do, but not enough people. So yeah. So it's not just CBA who owns them all. So yeah. And there's a whole lot of startups as well. Like Sydney's becoming more and more of a thriving startup scene, and startups themselves are looking for people to be part of their team, core team. And it's not just an agency service. It's like people are integrating into their work, into their process. Yeah, so with the usability testing, you need to go through that sort of process. And testing happens not just at the end of when a product is finished, it's the entire process from a sketch. You can test, to test to see if that works, through to like a somewhat movable prototype to a design prototype right through to the product. So using usability testing techniques right through, different types of techniques. And when it comes to prior to launching, you do run it through another round of testing. And the thing with testing is that you can pick up things that are going that work or don't work, or any logic decisions that you've made around content structure or interactions. It doesn't guarantee that a product's going to be taken up by the market, because we've all worked on products that have flopped. Frankly, they will work, they're beautifully designed, they've gone through a whole process, and the market just doesn't care. So that from a functional point of view, you can test it and get it pretty much mostly right before launch, and you use the techniques at various stages. From sketching right through to working prototypes. So, and the number of people that you tend to test with is, Matt had a great curve the other day. I think 8 people gives you pretty much everything you need to know if the thing is working. Not if people love it, but only if the thing is working. Haven't had that much work in the physical space yet.
Okay.
And I keep saying yet because I'm yet. So it hasn't happened, but there's a lot of resistance. I remember when I became an information architect, a friend of mine, or former friend now, was an architect and hated the fact that I had the word architect in my title, because he studied for 7 years and I came from a design background. It's like, hated it. Like, it was just, there was so much resistance to things like that. But in terms of what we do, I think there's always resistance to something that's newly introduced, and in some of the places I've worked, it's just been a ferocious battle to try and get it ingrained into their processes. But once people go through the process and see what the value is, it becomes easy the next time, much easier. Because people, it does offer a lot of value if you follow a process, not a rigid process, but a methodology to get to a point. People do see the value in it. So resistance happens, and it wanes off after a little while.